Good evening. My name is Christy Vallier, and I am Assistant Professor of Architecture at the Knowlton School of Architecture and the chair of this year's Baumer Lecture Series entitled Doubling. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce Herman Hertzberger, a Dutch architect, professor, and prolific design legend living and practicing in Amsterdam. He has spent a lifetime educating the world about architecture, both inside and out. He started his own architectural practice in 1960 that is still very active today. He has taught at various universities, including his professorship at the Technical University of Delft, where he taught for over 29 years. He has published often and was one of the editors of Forum magazine, together with Aldo van Dyck and others. This influence and consistent body of work was recognized in 2012 with the gold medal from the Royal Institute of British Architects. The series entitled Doubling was highly impacted by the work of Herman Hertzberger, as he made a career out of doubling, tripling, and quadrupling the spatial opportunities within architecture. In fact, this morning as we were doing a driving tour of Columbus, he would say, yeah, interesting, but what's happening on the inside? How does that space work? And how are they connected? The ideas and projects that come out of his office have become models for the multitude of ways that a building can perform. Early in his career, he challenged the notion of form follows function. He was a proponent of polyvalent architectural form, one open to interpretation, adaptable, and expandable. He asked architecture to do more. These objectives manifested themselves in hundreds of projects across many typologies, including a small Montessori school in Delft, the Central Beheer office headquarters, otherwise known as a workshop for 1,000 people, and most recently, he has completed a total renovation of his own 1970s Vredenburg concert hall in Utrecht into the new music palace. All of these projects prioritize spatial zones and the design of the in-between, including innovative informal spaces. The projects use exaggerated stairs, sometimes multitudes, that perform beyond circulation to service interaction and gathering. These projects employ tactics to multiply sight lines in order to see as many people as possible through multiple spaces. And the spaces are never completely closed off, and elongated atriums are used to connect spaces that otherwise would have been disparate. His sense of spatial and volumetric control are both intricate and expansive at the same time. Please help me welcome Herman Hertzberger.
Does it work? Yes. Can you hear me? Well, this was a nice lecture about me. I asked myself what I should add to it. Is it okay?
I don't mind if I move it closer. Move it
No. Yeah, okay. And I do realize that this title, Why Architecture, is a little bit strange, because you are all students and professors, so you should know what the idea of architecture, what the purpose of architecture is. But sometimes I don't know myself, so maybe you can tell me. But what I see in this fantastic school, because it's not to be polite, but what I have seen, this is just an exquisite school. I have seen hundreds of projects, well, in the make, of course. And I have seen shapes I've never seen in my life before. And I have seen how this was presented in ways I've never seen in my life. Unbelievable. So all the possibilities are there. But why? Why are we doing it? Is it to earn money? I would say start a coffee corner or something. That's a better thing to get money, because architecture is a hopeless at this moment. There's no work at all. Only some big stars. Oh, of course, you want to become a big star. That's of course the idea. But you know, when I see this crowd, maybe in this hall, I'm not pointing at somebody in particular, but there might be one big star here, might be, and all the rest is going to happen with all the rest. I'm not negative. I don't want to be negative, but I think it's reasonable in an academic situation to ask yourself, why are you doing all this? And in my lecture, I'm not telling you how to do it and what to do, but I can just tell you about my own opinion. And this is what I'm going to do. Could the light be a little bit extinguished? Not completely. What I'm showing you here is an old, not to say an old-fashioned building. It's the Bibliothèque Nationale, the old Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. It's a reading room, and it's very quiet there, but I was really moved when I was in. That was before the new library was made. And you saw all these people working and concentrating and also seeing each other and whispering, and you know, there were contacts of the people. But it was like a church. And you say, was saying, yes, you have no cupolas on your picture. I was too much concentrated on the people, so I forgot the cupolas. Because, you know, it's really a sort of church. I'm inclined to say that the purpose of architecture, the reason, raisonnement of architecture is to keep people together. No, I'm not mad. This is actually what architecture should do, and if it is not, architecture is not able to make forms, shapes, constructions that keep people together, then it's useless. You know, in the whole history of architecture, it always came down to keeping people together. You have this fantastic example in New York. The only about, and I should not say about the only museum in the world where you are not only to see paintings, but also to see nice girls and nice boys, and have an overlook, you know. Well, I always went to the museum when I was young, not just for the paintings, but for the girls, you know. And I'm sure that some girls also go to the museum to see some nice boys. Who knows what's going to happen? But this is conscious or unconscious what Vredenburg Wright did in this building, you know. The feeling, I mean, it's an extremely interesting building. When you see it from the outside, it is also quite modern in the nonsensical way. You know? It's a completely a shape, you know. It could have been made here by students in the workshop. But I forgive him, you know, as I forgive everybody that makes beautiful shapes, as long as the interior space keeps people together. And this is what my lecture is about, you know. In New York, you know, you have this fantastic space, which I think is the most beautiful and useful urbanistic space in the city. I'm not saying in the whole world. I don't want to exaggerate. But, you know, this Rockefeller Center is, you know, the skating is not very well. The Dutch are better at skating than the Americans, as you know. But it is not about performance, you know, who's winning, who is faster than the other, but it's the feeling. I mean, that sort of simple, you know, what is it? You know, just a little tiny escape, you know. But it keeps people together. I have been there several times, and every time, especially in winter, people from all directions come there, not to see the skating people, but to, this is the only place in the world, well, I should not say the only place, but the place where you have the feeling of the heart of the center. This is in the sand pit I made in one of my schools. Actually, it's the same thing in a different scale. You know, it's a sort of small box where people feel sort of protected and feel embraced by the space. By what the architect did was just some stupid walls. You know, stupid walls. It's sort of very cheap material. Nothing special. No exciting thing. You have in Roma, you have the St. Peter, and this place which Bernini made in front of the church. This is actually a photograph I realized before the Spina was demolished, and they made this fantastic axis, you know, which is very monumental. But the idea of Bernini was to close it off with a building over here, but the popes didn't want that because they preferred to have that big perspective. But can you think of a better space that almost literally embraces the people that are there together for some reason or another? You know, I'm not interested in the reason why. I'm not religious in the sense that you know, that I understand what the emotional thing is there. The only thing I understand is that the architect, conscious or unconscious, was able to make the form, the architecture that was necessary to keep the people together. And also the church. They told me that churches were, well, this is also the Peter Bernini picture. They always told me that the church is to celebrate the, well, all the religious feelings. I'm not quite sure. Maybe the idea of church is maybe even the idea of religion is apart from the fact that you want the higher, you want the longing to something better than the life on earth. It is also the way to come together. People in the church are coming together, rich and poor. It's the only place where rich and poor not meet, but see each other and are even able to touch each other. You know? It is not so strange that actually architecture started with building churches, not with building houses. The houses traditionally were made by the people themselves, you know. Only from, say, 2000, maybe with some exceptions in the 19th century, housing was not made by architects. Architects were concerned with churches, big public buildings, and palaces for the very rich that more wanted to show off. I mean, you cannot deny that architecture always, through the whole history, has been something for the rich. Architecture, except for making churches where poor and the rich, and so also the poor would come in, has always been something for the rich. When you become an architect, you are going to work for the rich people, not for the poor people. When you feel concerned with the poor, you may choose another profession. My main example is always the arenas. The arenas which were made by the Romans. You find everywhere where the Romans have been, and all of a sudden I realized that the same arena, like this one in Arles, at different times was used in a completely different way. This arena was used as a form to keep a small city protected to the barbarians. And this same form here was making a piazza in the city. This is a remarkable thing. This is about structuralism. Structuralism, basically in architecture, is based on the fact that there are forms that, although remaining themselves, can be used for completely different things. I'll show you another example. This is maybe you recognize this painting, which is hanging in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which is a Vermeer painting, The Milkmaid. And this is a photograph in Africa. Both people are concerned with the same thing. They try to, well, you see what they are doing. They do the same thing, and they have different means to do it. So whereas the arenas were had the same form, doing different things, here you see the same thing done in different but it is always about containing. The first idea of architecture is to contain, container is not the right word, but make things that can contain things. You are only the human uses pots and pans and cups and plates. You know, the animal, maybe with one small exception, does not use that. They just eat around, you know. And there are some animals that collect nuts and things and put them somewhere in a hollow thing, but only the human is always trying to make things that can contain, to keep it, you know, to cook it, and actually, of course, this is not architecture, but actually this feeds back to what, in my opinion, architecture should do. You know, always try to contain people. So all these shapes, I am impressed. But where are the people? And you, not you, but in general, we all forget that buildings are made to contain people. The other example I always use is the pyramids. The pyramids are actually fantastic. I love pyramids, you know. It's a fantastic piece of scenery. Maybe when you have to redesign the City Hall of Boston, you could maybe make pyramids and put it in horizontal slices to contain people, if you like, you know. But about pyramids, it is actually hollow. No, it's not hollow, it's massive. But there's only one person lying in that thing, and we are not quite sure of that even. And it's lying there for eternity. And it's also dead. I mean, he is also dead. The Baumer Theatre is for maybe, what shall I say, 10,000 people to celebrate life. It's the opposite, you know. But also the amphitheatre, as an idea, is a containing form. You know, it contains people, and also in the idea of the Greek theatre, it's also having a view to the outside. So it's both. It's, so to say, containing, giving the feeling of being together, and having a feeling of togetherness. It's also providing the view to the outside. So my idea is that architecture should concentrate more on this idea than on this idea. Well, you see, I mean, I could talk an hour about these pictures. You know, here, the architect, the viewer is always outside the thing. And here, he's always inside the thing, you know. And the problem of the idea of architecture, that's why I say why architecture, is that in the idea we all have, except me, except some other people maybe, of architecture, is always based on a standpoint outside the thing you are making, you know. And my standpoint is from the inside. So I suggest you to see your buildings, to think your buildings more from the outside outward, from the inside outward, and less from the outside inward. No, from the outside you stay outside and you don't see, you don't consider the inside. I made this Central here building, and I was happy to see it as an example for what was done today. But here, in the inside of the building, the criticism has been that it's more a city than a building, you know, which I don't consider a criticism. I consider this as a compliment. Because I think every building should be a city. And the city, well, I like Ohio, but I do not, Columbus, Ohio, but I'm not considering Columbus, Ohio as the right example of a city, because it lacks the interior quality which you find, for instance, in Manhattan. Manhattan, you have, wherever you are, there's always that interior quality. I'm not just referring to middle-aged towns, small towns in Italy. No, Manhattan is the example for the of city. This is in the buildings of Central here, and I was looking for another picture. This is actually my inspiration, which is galleries in Paris. Are you going to Paris? Visit the galleries, because there for the first time, well, maybe not for the first time, but anyway, in a clear way, it is shown that inside and outside are not valuable oppositions, you know. Here you see in the inside, you see the outside, you know. And this is the idea of the building as a city. And I was very much inspired by that, making this Central here building. And what I did was just cross the building by streets, you know, based on this idea of the gridiron idea. And the building was just chopped up in space units. And this is about polyvalence, which you mentioned in your introduction. The idea has been to make space units, you know, which can be used in different ways. I mean, it's a little different from the idea of multi-purpose, because multi-purpose is saying beforehand something is, let me say, a music hall and or a concert hall and also a theater or something, you know, you make it for two different things. The idea of polyvalence is that people have the possibility, are incited, so to say, to interpret the space in their own way. And here I use this space in same space unit in different ways. So this was not a functional building in the sense of make a specific shape for the staircases, specific shape for the staff offices, a specific space for this, a specific space for that. but I try to get rid of the whole idea of specifying things and try to come to a sort of, if you like, universal way, universal space unit which can be used in many ways. And here it is an office building, and now it's abandoned because this office wanted to make a larger building, wanted to inhabit a larger building. In the meantime, they dismissed all these people so they could have stayed in this building, but that's the economic crisis. But now they think about making it into a school. And this is the condition of today, that buildings will not remain what they were made for. You know, this is a school of architecture, and it seems to work quite well at this moment. But there might be, I don't want to be pessimistic, but there might be a condition that you don't need architects anymore, and then you have this building. You can do two things. You can tear it down, a lot of concrete, very expensive, and a pity because it's a very nice building. But what I want to promote is the idea that our buildings have a sort of universal quality, that they can be used also for, well, let's say we need another hospital. Can you also put a hospital in this building? And for me, that is the sort of criteria, and I have the feeling that today buildings are shaped too much, too specific for one type of program, and I have the feeling that we have to step back to the idea of making buildings, buildings, that just could become what the society asks for at a certain moment. So not exaggerate too much the idea of the specialty, the specificity of the thing, the way. This is the building we just finished. And this is of course a drawing. Actually, this used to be. Well, you see, it's finished, and you see this drawing was not quite bad. You know, it's really realized almost the same way, which I think is amazing. Anyway, this is what it used to be. A building just for classical music as part of a shopping center, believe me or not. But what was it? What it used to be? With a fantastic concert hall with very good acoustics. I mean, there was very good acoustician. It was not the architect completely to do it. And it is actually one of the very few halls that are completely in the round. And if you like, it is a little bit based on the Philharmonic of Berlin, but this is more radical, actually, and it worked quite well. But there was a lot of political turmoil, and this is what it was. And at the end, they decided to keep the old hall and this part and tear down this part. And they extended it with building, you knew why you made that building in the way you made it. And then they come and they tear down parts and they add parts. The idea was that except for the symphony hall that remained, they wanted the chamber music hall. So far so good. They wanted the jazz hall, okay, and they wanted the pop hall and a crossover hall. And they asked me to supervise. Well, that was not so easy as I tell it now, the whole story, but they asked me to supervise, but all these different people had different architects. The jazz hall had a jazz architect. The pop hall had a pop architect. And they asked me to make a chamber music hall, and they were all old architects. And I proposed to have a young architect to make the crossover hall. So all of a sudden, I was in the situation of a sort of urbanist. And tried to make this, in fact, collage, what you in painting you call a collage, different entities that are, so to say, just speaking their own language and are put together and try to make a composition of that whole. And what we did, we added this sort of, what you call, tent over it, like what trucks have. You know, trucks have that sort of, I don't know the word in your language, but to keep it all together. To keep the whole thing together. And so this is the collage of things, different architects talking their own language, completely different languages in form, in color, in everything. And I propose to make this sort of thing and put it on top of it to keep it all together. So that is actually the condition of the urbanism. And you see, this made sort of building where the old building was trying to hide more or less under it. Wanting, can I also be part of it, you know? Yes, we try. And the chamber music hall, the jazz hall, the pop hall, and then in front of it you have the other hall. And what we tried to do was making just spaces in between that were sort of connecting spaces like streets and places in a city. I mean, I wished I could introduce a gridiron, but this is impossible in this situation. And the old hall was preserved and renewed. And people, I thought, well, it's a little bit old-fashioned when you see all these new things. People came in, look at this. I mean, in some way they didn't realize that it had a quality of the other. This is the new chamber music hall we built. It's not yet tested. I'm still not sleeping about what the acoustical result will be. We'll hear that in a couple of weeks when we have the first try-out concert in it. It's sort of based on the vertical, the idea of the old Italian theater, you know, when you have all these galleries over each other. And you see in between there is this the idea of being in an airport, you know, big airport atmosphere with escalators and well, it's just like in the city. And the old columns in the old part, I colored, and this gives a sort of new smell in the building. So, you know, it's not quite the way it has been. And here you see the old building and the new building on top of each other. Actually, it's a mess. But when you think of a city, most cities are a mess. I mean, being a mess is a sort of characteristic of a city. And I start to ask myself, do we really need to think in terms of harmony, or do we just compose like collage? This is another building I finished, well, let us say recently, which is a school in Italy. I don't want to propose my worst enemy to build a building in Italy. So, it's a matter of surviving. Anyway, I think we survived. This was a school for primary and for secondary education, and it was based on the idea, it is based on the idea of a sort of central street that connects as a connector. I'm always thinking, gradually more thinking in terms of urbanism, you know. For me, architecture transforms into the idea of urbanism. So you see these elements. Actually, they are big space elements, are grouped to a street, you know. And you have this idea, you can pile them up, you can extend this building, because every building you make today should also be extendable. I forgot to say that this afternoon in the studio, but all these buildings that are made just as a complete piece of sculpture, they will, in some years' time, they will fail. You have to, you know, buildings are not just autonomous pieces of sculpture that stay the way they are conceived. They will not only be used by for other purposes, but they also will extend or they will shrink. They are sort of in time, they are just going to be transformed. My idea, which is always to try to make a sort of structural basis, well, call it a structure, the idea of tectonics, to have a sort of simple, sort of universal, as much as possible, basis onto which, say, objective basis, which can be interpreted in different ways. So this is the structural basis. I mean, when you make shapes, and it was very useful for me to be in that studio this afternoon, that shapes are made without taking into consideration the way they are constructed. That is what I consider the lack of tectonic. A real architect is not only thinking in terms of forms, saying, oh yes, but this mountains can make everything, and they can make everything. That is the misunderstanding, But the building should also be sort of clear in terms of how it is made. And so that for me is very important. And there's a very simple system of beams, because it has to be cheap. In America, everybody is rich, so you have enough money to do what you want. But in Europe, especially in Italy, they have not much money, and you have to build in a sort of very elementary way. And simple flooring over it, and what we leave is this open spaces, which were a theme like the old Roman houses. So here you have the central street where everything is coming together. It's a sort of comprehensive. I must say this building is a beautiful building. I'm sure when you are working in it, you know your way, you know where the bathrooms are, and you can find everything. But it is not quite comprehensive in the sense that for me the ideal building is something like, well, not the only possibility, but a main street where everything is connected, where you find each other, and where everything happens. And this is the idea of the inner courts. I sold them by saying that they're based on the idea of the old Roman house, and that works, And they really work in that way. We made that place in the shadow where the children work outside, which is in the Roman climate, quite nice. Huh? And here you see the outside space is very important. This is not the inner court, but that's the outskirts. I'll explain you later. The thing doesn't work quite well. And in the inside, there is always the main piazza where everything comes together. And here you see the outside space. The building is sunken. I mean, when you have the Parthenon is put on a sort of base, You have to climb that to get to the building. Here am I, And I did the opposite. I put the building sort of in a pit. It doesn't work. It's like cold. So the idea to put it down, well, it was very obvious because there was bad soil, and they had to take away this poisoned soil. And it was supposed to be very expensive to fill it up with new soil. They said, "Oh, leave it out. We put the building down." What you are winning, is that this is going to be a space where, like, think of it in Epidaurus, people are directed to each other. We made stairs all around, and this is the result, that people are sitting, and you have this space as a containing space, so to say. This is a theme I have in many of my buildings. This is a school, a very old school in Amsterdam, where in the center there were these steps, and I discovered what the possibilities of the steps are. You know, they are actually tables to work on, and they are a place where people see each other. And you get the sort of position of the modern school is not just the classrooms where one person is telling you how things are working, but where people looking for the truth in their own way with their own computers. And the school should be more a place where you have many of these possibilities to sit and to have some protection and some view, and where you can work yourself. It started actually in the first school I made, where I made a hollow in the floor, which became a first, let's say, principle of a place. And actually, in painting, you can learn a lot of painting. The Van Gogh, the potato eaters, actually a family around the table, and I don't know whether they like each other, let alone love each other, maybe they're fighting, but anyway, it's the sort of primary group of people sitting around the table. And it makes no difference whether you are eating potatoes or you are with your laptops Skyping to each other at the other end of the table. But it is the feeling of being together as the primary group. So I think this is the first building stone of architecture. The idea of the small group, say 6, 7. It's not forbidden to have 8 people around it, which is also representing the family around the table in the house, which is for me a building stone in the sense that when I make a building, I try to keep as many of these places, space units, which I call places, as possible, because I know that in practice, whether they are drinking coffee or they are reading or they are whatever they're doing, they are always in this sort of group. So I base my architecture on this sort of groups. And 30 years later, no, I think 40 years, 50 years later, the same block is still there, and in the meantime they decided to serve meals at noon, and they use the same block now for serving out meals. Well, this is actually polyvalence, making things that, according to new situations that happen and we don't know, maybe in future, that it always serves, it always works. You know, this is my ideal, and this is not functionalism. Functionalism is something else. It is actually trying to make basic things, to concentrate on basic things that are interpreted by people according to the situation in which they are. In another school, we made this sort of places like this, and in a large space, you know, not classrooms. Yes, there are also classrooms, but the main space is a big space which is articulated into places where things can happen. When I look in the big hall in this building and I see all these groups working, you have this sort of cardboard walls in between, and it's one big space where all these groups are working. With a little bit of articulation, could also be done by cardboard walls. I must confess. All these people can work in one room. You don't need all these walls and doors with names on it and keys to keep them private. I try to make as much as possible public. For me, public is the criteria. The private is just, well, not more than really necessary. And you see that you see when you visit the school that all these projects are done, helped, so to say, by the architecture. So for me, the purpose of architecture is a sort of, if I may say, a sort of helping hand for the interpretations people want to give to it. What I think, I said architecture is to keep people together. I could also say architecture is to accommodate people, to accommodate the meeting of people. And, you know, why not, when you make a column, make a place where you can sit down. And when I look in this school, I see in every corner there's somebody sitting on the floor, working, trying to find a little bit of concentration. Try to make in a building, it's my idea, as many places where you can concentrate, you can make a date, you can accommodate people. So for me, the idea of a column going down to the floor might be nice in the aesthetical thing. Oh, by the way, architecture has something to do with aesthetics, but it's not pure aesthetics for me. It's for me accommodation for people and do it in an aesthetic way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And, I also learned this at Bernini. I'm sure that Bernini made his columns in the St. Peter's Place not on purpose. He didn't make them purposely so that very old women can take place there. But for me, it was a sort of inspiration, that even in this classical architecture, this is going to happen. This is in an old people house, the idea of half doors. I just show this picture to show you that I'm doing what I can to accommodate people to have contact, So at the one hand, protection and making niches and places where you can be on yourself. On the other hand, there always can be a nice girl walking by, and you should not miss that. I mean, this is not to show that, but you understand what it means. You have, of course, all ages, but there's always a need to be in contact with the other, or to be not in contact with the other. But the relationship of people is my main theme. This is not architecture. This is sort of where you see how do things work. And this is also architecture. This is the smallest measure when you make a column, when you make a wall. Do realize that this situation can take place. Can you come with me? Utopian projects, and he was, he was just denied for the fact that he was looking at a 2.5 scale. But for me, the fact that he made this niche in the balconies of his unité d'habitation in Marseille, and I don't know, maybe you invented it, somebody maybe, but the idea to make such a niche is a fantastic idea about accommodation of people. Which architect making such a big building, would have some place in his brains, or in her brains, to think of making this niche? That for me is a sign. I mean, it's unimportant, but the fact that you think when you are making a big building, balconies, 1,600 persons, I think, in that building, that you think, maybe there are people who want to put a Maria sculpture in it. Or other people that think, well, maybe somebody wants to put a plant in it. Or other people who want to put a souvenir in it. They got from a trip or a portrait of a child. So let's make a small niche where they can put it in. That is, I think, the way of thinking an architect should have. And I realize that it is more feminine than male. And I'm not the first one to say that architecture should be more a profession for women than for men. But I ask all the men to also, while there are a lot of women that think male today, there are more of women that think in a masculine way than there are boys that think in a feminine way. Anyway, I wanted to keep outside of this matter more of this feeling for, you know, maybe sort of nest feeling, the feeling of containing people, and also the things people want to have with them would not be bad for architecture. This is another school. It's not very good, but I made it's quite a striking example. I made here a place, what I call a place, you know, space unit, where you can put a table and have maybe 8, maybe 10 people around. Now you cannot see because it's a bad photograph, but this is sliding. There are sliding doors. You can put them here and make it sort of a little bit more protective. And you come back in that school after a couple of years, and no, shit. And you see this. They interpreted, they took the architectonic devices I made, you see, they're still there, you see, and they made it into their home. I mean, it's a sort of bourgeois, and I know that architects, I'm surprised that people don't walk out of the hall now. They say, well, is this about architecture? Is this why we are here? To see this crap? Yes, this crap is for me very important. I mean, I understand that you want to make buildings not for people but for yourself, to become famous, to become rich. Yes? But it's also important, except for being famous and being rich, it's also important that what you do makes the world, in a way to say it a little bit dramatically, more habitable. And that's what happens here. I'm not quite happy with this thing. This is horrible. The architect, well, he made you know, very nice thing, and look the nonsense they put in it. At first sight, I say, no, you should not spoil my building. And after a minute, I thought, wow, spoil my building. I mean, if that makes her happy, then I did a good thing. So, how many architects, how many architectural students would allow the people to take their kitsch, their nonsense, their filthy things into your perfect, beautiful building, and waiting for the photographer to make clean photographs to publish in a very special magazine. Well, you go very quick to make that photograph for your magazine, because after a week time, all that things come in. And you know, I know that what I'm saying here is sort of doesn't work for you, because your education is completely different. But this is my belief, that only architecture works when people are able to interpret it in their filthy way, or in their very aesthetic way. I mean, it could go in different directions. But this for me is actually, I mean, of course you can say in terms of the tectonics, they destroyed my column, they destroyed everything. Somewhere it's true, you know, it's a sort of basic thing. It's about people, and it gives the idea of architecture a different dimension. So I come back to the middle plate of Vermeer, a world famous picture. She's not very beautiful. She's a sort of, well, I don't, happily enough, I don't know the word for that in English, but she's not what we think the beautiful woman you find in the magazines, you find in the, but it's a sort of representation of the normal life. And what I'm asking is, I mean, architecture is trying to do extravaganza. It's always trying to be the extraordinary, better, larger, more special, more this, more that, you know. Do what you want, but don't forget the basics. And that in fact is my message. I mean, if you want to make an extravagant building, do it, but don't forget the basics, you know. I just found out that this building is well, by the way, it's the library, the University Library of Columbia in New York. And it is made as a sort of, not a copy, but a remembrance of the Parthenon, where you go up to the knowledge which is packed in that library building. And that when I was there, I found out that there was a sort of what they called revolution. They were not agreeing with what the university was doing. And the same stairs that were used for being solemn and being serious, you know, I can't do that here because I have no stairs. You understand what I mean? Was all of a sudden turned into a sort of casual thing where people were listening to somebody, and I don't mind what he was telling. But the fact that these people were united in a way, and that architecture was able to unite these people. That is really what I want. What I want to promote. My last picture is, you know, just a place in a small hill town in Italy where I don't think it has been an architect or an urbanist, you know. There happened to be this condition, there happened to be that condition, even the window, and all together they are looking like in Rockefeller Center to something very unimportant. But it is not my concern whether it's important. For them it was important. It was the game where their man could show that they were the best. And they are all looking, and you know, this for me is the sort of conditions that we as architects maybe could try to make. And this is maybe what I told you is maybe a different view on architecture, and maybe you think not for me, but this is my opinion, to accommodate for people and to unite people, to make things in such a way that it gets people together. And this is what I want to tell you. Thank you very much.